The Well is what people are talking about these days as a social enterprise. It's a business that's running on its own value proposition and generating its own economic platform and engine, but it only exists to achieve certain kind of social outcomes. So we're going to talk about what are the outcomes we're trying to achieve, but we also want to give you a good feel for how we've planned this as a business and as an enterprise. Because a lot of time and attention and care has gone into really trying to make this viable as a business that stands on its own. And at this point, I'd say we have really fantastic conditions for success, which we want to give you a feel for. But the reason that we took this approach, rather than form a nonprofit kind of organization, was we didn't want to be subjected to all the whims of funders that if you're in the nonprofit sector, you suffer with. We wanted to get our own platform that would have its own sustainability. And so it's really challenged us to think about what we're offering from a real enterprise kind of lens. But the only reason we're thinking about those things, those of us who've gotten this far, is because of the social lens that have inspired this. So we'll start there, and if this works, there we go. So it's a social enterprise. It has those two dimensions. It's a co-op model. It's a for-profit co-op. You can form a nonprofit co-op. We chose to form a for-profit co-op for the reasons I mentioned. We chose the cooperative model because we thought it was the truest business model we could find to the spirit of what we want to do. And our intention is, like we have a little pun going on here, nourishment for a change. It's nourishment as opposed to some of the other stuff we sometimes get. But it's also nourishment for a very particular kind of change. We're trying to support a certain kind of change in our community, in our society. So we're hoping that this place is going to provide nourishment for body, mind, and spirit. We have a range of things that we're offering under this roof that are not all, very seldom would you find all these different things under one roof, but we've done that deliberately. The unifying aspect of this we're hoping to create is that there's an environment here of unconditional welcome, of being present to whoever finds their way here, and of compassion, of recognizing that all of us are going through this incredible transition from an unsustainable society to hopefully a more sustainable society. Now, some of us may be going kicking and screaming into that transition, some of us may be going in denial, some of us may be going with great excitement and adventure, but we're all in it. And we want to really honor the diversity of people's experience as we're collectively going through this change. Both the joys and the fears, all of the excitement, all of the unknown, that's what we want to be present to. So we're holding three things very much as our guiding star. One is a more sustainable way of living in this part of Ottawa. Also one that's socially just and spiritually fulfilling. The social justice and the environmental sustainability we feel are inextricable because they take their roots in the same fundamental paradigm of an economy that either exploits nature or some other people in order to expand at the rate that we've been wanting to expand. And so our feeling is that you can't really effectively address sustainability and ignore social justice or vice versa. And so we're holding both of those objectives in our mind, and we also really want to acknowledge that there's a whole inner part of our experience, individually and collectively, about what it's like to make this change. Some in the transition movement, they call us the heart and soul of transition. But how does one deal with the unknown? How does one deal with all the challenging information that we face? Where does one find hope? How does one deal with one's fears? We want to acknowledge that that's part of this. And we're not talking about religion, but we are talking about being aware of the inner dimension of our experience, both individually and collectively. We're trying to create this space where people feel comfortable acknowledging that that's part of the process we're in. So, we've launched. The bobsled has left the top of the run, and we're opening early March 2014. Our dream is that we have a soft opening March 1st. We run for a few weeks and get the bugs out, And on the spring equinox weekend of the 21st, we have a huge grand opening with music in the park, presentations, celebrations. So that's our goal. We'll be open 7 to 7, 6 days a week. The main business operation here is a food center, local organic grocery, cafe, coffee house. We'll be selling prepared meals, local beers and wine, so that the real kind of main economic cluster are these different ways of offering local organic food in this community. We'll also be doing classes, presentations, and workshops. A lot of those will be food centered. They'll be about cooking with seasonal diet. They'll be about making your food dollar go further economically, nutrition, cooking classes, but they'll also address other issues of sustainability and social justice. We'll have a specialized lending library of books that have been donated by people along the core themes that we're tracking, sustainability and social justice, community economic development. We're bothering to do this because largely these aren't available in the public library. They also happen to be a number of people in our community who are sort of my vintage, who've collected these libraries, and at this stage of our lives say, I'm tired of dragging these things around. But actually don't want to lose connection to them. So if you'll hold them, and I can still find them, you can have them. So it's an interesting example of one thing that's really exciting about the well is we've garnered some interest from sort of 25 years old to 70 years old, and everybody in between. And that mix that's involved makes some really amazing things happen. There are some folks who are later in their life who have some resources, like these libraries. But there's also young folks who have tons of energy and fresh ideas, and those things have been able to come together. This is just one little example. We'll also be hosting music, poetry, storytelling, and art. And the reason we'll be doing that is because our whole focus is on helping develop a resilient community. A community that finds within itself the resources it needs to nourish itself in all ways. In some cultures, they would tell you that social change just isn't possible without music. They wouldn't even imagine it. So our space downstairs, there's a 30-seat cafe, but in the evenings that can be reconfigured as a space for cooking classes. On other evenings, it can be reconfigured to be a cafe where there's presentations, or there's a musician, or a poet, or a storyteller. And in terms of up here, there's going to be a multi-purpose room that will have different functions, but we want to create space for whatever works for people in terms of the body, mind, spirit piece. Yoga, Tai Chi, mindfulness classes, meditation. And there'll be 2 community spaces available for folks to use. One is this multi-purpose room up here that will be a more informal space, community dialogues, talking circles, classes. Downstairs, the 30-seat cafe can be reconfigured sort of after the hours of 3 o'clock, because we're only serving breakfast and lunch for now. After 3 o'clock, the community groups want a meeting space with tables and chairs and flip charts and that kind of thing. We can make that space available too. So we have these 2 very different forms that the community can use to gather. And what we're hoping is that people who care about what the well cares about will find this a useful home. And to the extent that they want to make it their home, we'd love for them to make it their home and to welcome them. So we're also up here, we're going to be having about 800 to 900 square feet of office space available for individuals or organizations who see what they're doing as nourishing this change. In different times, it might be alternative healthcare people or coaches or counselors, maybe nonprofit organizations. It seems that we've already got the space probably fully leased out already. So that's another example where it seems that what we're offering is meeting a community need. That people have shown up pretty quickly to say, I want to be part of this, I want to be here, I want to contribute to it. But the whole organizing theme will be nourishment for a change. So the Community Food Hub, I mentioned we'll be doing cooking classes, the CSA drop-off. Yep, I'm going to ask Jacqueline to come up and speak to this because she's our chef.
Yeah, okay, good. You can flip.
Okay, I'll flip.
You flip. There, to learn that. So I'm currently, I own Stone Soup Food Works, which is a local organic food truck, and we operate at the University of Ottawa. And I joined in with Bill on the well, and because I really, oh, there, and we'll go back. So we're, so I'm really, and part of my mission has always been to one of the reasons I wanted to do street food was because I wanted to have sustainable foods that were accessible. So that we're, and this is I feel like really an extension of that. So it really fits in with my mission. And so what we're planning on doing with the food is really integrating the farm and the community. So we'll have an access point for CSA drop-offs.
What's CSA?
So it's a community shared agriculture system. So people pre-purchase food from the farmers and the harvest is shared. So the farmers get the money up front and are able to pay for seeding and getting their crops in the ground. And then you the consumers, or they're not really consumers, members, shareholders are, thank you, are able to pick up food and share the bounty of the harvest. Or if it's a really bad harvest, usually it's the CSAs are generally very generous, but you get a good vegetable. So we'll have it as a CSA drop-off. We're going to source our fresh produce primarily from local farmers who we're connected with. We have a few farms, like farms that I've been working with, and we'll probably draw in new farms, as well as like having small producers and local producers. So with a real focus on organic and fair trade foods in our grocery section. And as well, we're going to be really focused on one of the kitchen that we have is going to be both a production kitchen, as well as it's going to be able to transform into a demonstration kitchen. So there'll be a counter, so we'll be able to have not fully hands-on. We don't have quite the space to do a fully hands-on cooking class, but there'll be some aspects of that, from basic cooking instruction, which is something I've been wanting to teach but haven't had the space. So like a 10-week course where you can go from nothing to putting together 10 meals on what you have. Food justice, we'll have farmers come in, we'll talk about preservation, and we'll just run the gamut. That's something I'm really excited about. And also talking about food security, seed saving, all of these parts of agriculture will have a space for that. And we also are going to be working with a variety of organizations to discuss and address food security. Anything you want to add, Bill?
No.
Okay. So because we haven't really talked about co-op structure yet, but we do have a producer section of our cooperative. So one of the parts of that is that farmers and producers are paid fairly for their food. So we're always going to be seeking to achieve a balance of, which isn't going to be necessarily always easy, but to achieve a balance of accessibility and living wages. Farmers are generally very poorly paid in this country, so that and food is not paid at a fair price. So that's something that we're hoping to be able to address in conjunction with the producers. So there'll be an ongoing discussion with that. As well, the same situation with our workers. The food industry is pretty poorly paid. And it's got very tight margins, but in general we also want to be providing our workers with a fair living wage, because this is part of it, we're nourishing within our cooperative as well as within the community. So we're going to be working with this balance of accessibility and fair wages. So that's something that's going to be a challenge, but it's something that's very much worth addressing, because the system right now, as it is very unequal. So it's something that we'll be working on addressing. And there are ways of doing it, like bulk ordering and just working with surpluses particularly. One thing that I find is very effective is using what's in season. I use a lot of things because I make a lot of soup, so I use a lot of things that are seconds or have blemishes or that wouldn't be sold at a grocery on a grocery level. So those we'll use in the kitchen. So we'll be able to use the full selection from our farms. We're just committed to working through that dialogue as well, and to try to achieve that balance.
Just say on this one, this is not easy. This is really challenging, but there are a lot of food co-ops across the province who are actively working this challenge together, trying solutions, trying new projects. And what's clear is that a for-profit co-op like us can only be part of the solution. we're going to have to be working with a lot of other folks who are playing a part in this. The food banks, the food center, Just Food. We just want to join the project. We don't pretend that we've got any kind of magic answer around this.
Yeah. Oh, there.
So there we are.
That's me.
But maybe
I
just in terms
thought
of
you were telling me about the truck.
the future of the truck.
The future of the truck. So we're working that out, but the truck and the cafe are going to have some integration in terms of menu. The truck's going to stay on at the University of Ottawa campus, and will likely go out as an ambassador for the Well to events because we are mobile. I've been operating the truck since February 2011. Jer over there helped build it, and was one of the first non-chip food trucks in the city. So it was pretty exciting this summer to see the food trucks rolling out, you know, to get that change, because I think it's something that does create transformation in the city too. So the missions are very similar. Like it's comforting food, it's accessible, it's priced for students, and I'm working with farmers and using a lot of healthy and delicious food. So,
another aspect of what we're doing, this is turning more to the enterprise part of the project. We've been thinking from the beginning that we would design this business based on the same kind of principles that people observe make a healthy natural system vibrant, resilient, and full of vitality. So we'll be seeking to minimize our own environmental impact. We'll be looking at creating very enhancing relationships with the members, the guests, suppliers, partners, the neighborhood. We really see ourselves entering the neighborhood and finding our place here in relation to all the other people who are already here and who have already been doing things. There are other food sellers here. We want to be in relationship. There are nonprofits around. So we see ourselves kind of on the best of days, I think, humbly taking a small space in the neighborhood and not pretending to be a solution to everything that we're talking about, but partnering with the people here who are already working on that. We have deliberately designed our enterprise operations with the principles of permaculture, which you may be familiar with, but Bonita, who I know just came in, is one of the lead permaculture trainers in this part of the world. She and her husband, partner, worked with us for a year and a half, using the principles of permaculture to design the business side of our operation. So that's a very explicit commitment, obviously, that the way we operate is consistent with the principles that we're trying to promote. So our current structure is that we have an interim board of directors. They're just the folks who got it started and applied for the incorporation, all that kind of thing. We have working groups that are focused really tightly on the first 6 months before we open our doors. You can see there are posters around the walls, and in the blue form that you have in your hand gives you an outline of what they're focused on for the next 6 months. It's very much about, we got things we have to get done to get the doors open. We've had a lot of conversations for a couple of years, and now we're in real work mode. We've also got an amazing array of advisors and contractors who have stepped up to support us in areas where we really need expertise, whether that's about how to form a co-op, legal, architectural, accounting. We're really well supported. We also have a growing number of people who really like what we're up to, but they're really busy doing stuff already, and they've said, I can't really work on the co-op. When I'm out there doing my other thing, I want to be able to tell people about the co-op. And so we've got a growing group of people who are out there on our behalf. So there's 7 of us on the board right now. But once we get going and we have a body of membership, early in 2014 we'll have our first annual meeting, and we'll, the members who have joined the co-op will elect the first real board of directors. So this is what folks are working on right now, reaching out to folks like yourselves in the neighborhood, in the city, to let them know what we're doing, to invite them to be part of it, working with community partners. It's pretty obvious, promotion and marketing. The program development is really in 2 pieces. There's a small group getting going, thinking about the artistic program, what kind of music, storytelling, art, poetry, how will we be doing that? But then there's also the learning side of the program. What are the workshops? What are the classes? How are we going to, and who are the people who can teach that material? Obviously, there's a ton of finance and legal stuff, getting the space in shape, and building the organization. So the advisors we have and the contractors are helping us with these really key areas. One of the things that's been really amazing is when you enter the co-op world, other co-ops are incredibly generous and supportive, giving us their financials, showing us all their margins. We've been really well supported by the network of particularly food co-ops across the province. And at a break, we'll show a little video about what's happening province-wide in terms of food co-ops. So, one of the things that's huge for us as a business is that a group of people in the community bought this building for one purpose, which was to provide a long-term, stable home for this co-op. We initially looked at leasing space in this area, and you may have heard the stories of what's happened in Westboro, and it's marching down the street. But basically, local businesses leasing a space, after their lease comes up, they face 200%, 300%, 400% increases in their rent. And we thought, we're doing something with an economic model that's totally contrary to that kind of speculation and, frankly, greed. And this was one area where we didn't find anyone who, like when we went looking for a lawyer or an architect or an accountant, people showed up who cared about what we were doing, and they offered us good rates or pro bono work. In terms of a landlord, couldn't find a landlord who cared what we were doing and had any interest in supporting an alternative economic model. So we really hit a wall a little more than a year ago, and we decided, and after talking to some of the locally owned businesses in this part of town, many of them, like the Home Hardware Store and others, will tell you the only reason they're still viable is they own their building. So we decided to buy the building, and what we found a way to do was to create a holding company in which local members of the community could invest their retirement funds or non-retirement funds. So we've been able to purchase the building and totally finance its renovation with no bank financing. It's owned entirely by people who live in the community and who care about this project, and have made a 10-year commitment to invest their money at very modest return, not for a quick return or a quick flip of the building. So we have a tremendously positive economic umbrella that we're beginning under. So there's a holding company who owns this building in trust, and the co-op will lease from the building. But the holding company is committed to transferring the building to the co-op as it becomes profitable and is able to pay back the investors. So the long-term view is 10 years from now, the co-op has been successful enough and gotten itself established, it can buy the rest of the building from the holding company and carry on owning the building itself. So we have this very favorable lease and building ownership situation. Jacqueline brings phenomenal experience from her first 3 years at Stone Soup, getting her margins down, figuring out the mix. Just that whole part of our operation is a known entity. We know what the numbers are, we know what the food costs have to be, we know what the profitability is and isn't. We've also done extensive research and planning. There are quite a number of other co-ops in the province who are doing something very similar to what we're trying to do, and they've given us all their financial numbers, and it's been really helpful. There's also been some local private food businesses who've opened their books to us. Quite surprisingly. I mean, no real reason to do so, but they just, there it is. These are what the margins are, this is what your costs are going to look like. So every major figure in our business plan is confirmed by at least 2, sometimes 3 sources. Other co-ops, other local food retailers, stats can benchmarks for groceries, that kind of thing. So we're really confident about the business plan and its numbers. We're projected to break even about midway through our 2nd year, and then show modest profitability going forward. And the plan is incredibly detailed. You'll be able to take a look at it when we polish it up. There are tables and tables of spreadsheets. You can spend your life down there, and Kirsten, wherever she is, God bless her, has dwelt down there for about 6 months, comes up for air every once in a while to tell us what she found. So we have a phenomenal context for success. One thing being that there's other food providers in this neighborhood now. If we were the only food seller, we'd have the challenge of people thinking, well, I could go there, but maybe I won't get everything I need, so I'll go to the superstore. But there's a new Hintonburg market that you probably noticed, about 300 yards up the street. You may not know, but the LCB is moving in where the carpet store was 2 doors away. A lot of people don't know that Giant Tiger sells groceries up on their 2nd floor and are really trying to be more local. Al Jazeera up the street, which a lot of people don't notice and don't go into, has some very good food products. And we want to meet with those food retailers and say, what's our niche? What is it that you're carrying, and how can we complement that? So that people will begin to know that within a 5-minute walk, they can more or less get what they need for the week. They may not get the stuff they need for the month, the bulk stuff, the toilet paper, all those other essentials, but what you need for the next 4 or 5 days, either here or nearby, you'll be able to get, so people will be able to feel that. We have really strong relationships with farmers already, and with some of the CSAs that are operating who want to use this as their drop-off spot, which will bring all of their members here, and they'll be buying additional things when they show up. We've already probably leased out the 2nd floor, the LCBO. The Eddy, which is about 100 yards away, is the next most environmentally progressive building in the city. We've talked with those developers, said, I hope you open on time because we need your residents to be here. And as you probably know, the pedestrian traffic is growing. It's not here yet, really. So we have a little challenge for the first couple of years, but the LRT is opening in 2016. This little dead-end street, last piece of Wellington here, that is the city's plan as their primary pedestrian and bicycling access to the LRT. They'll be carrying Breeze Hill through with an overpass, and for Hintonburg and Mechanicsville, this will be the path for pedestrians and cyclists to get to the LRT. And you've probably seen some of the plans of the kind of housing developments that are planned right around the LRT station. So 5 years from now, this place is going to be very active on the sidewalks. We have a little challenge to get through the first couple of years, but the fact that our landlord has a 10-year perspective and has given us a low front end on our lease and letting that grow really helps us with that transition. So the renovation plans, you can see the plans on the wall at the break, but basically on the ground floor we've got our kitchen. There's a 30-seat cafe which can then be reconfigured to be cooking classes or performance space. This is our point of sale with beer and wine and coffee. This will be all grocery retail. And unlike other buildings on the main street, the things that are happening up here will be integrated with downstairs. There does have to be a security exit and a fire exit from up here, but the primary way in will be a staircase that begins inside the ground floor and comes up this way. So that the primary flow of in and out from this floor will be through the ground floor, as opposed to often on a main street it's some door over or around the corner. It's got nothing to do with on the ground floor. No, we're looking for a whole lot of exchange. And then up here, again, we'll have a lot of kitchen space, but then this will be the office space that's pretty much already leased out, and then the function room, which will be this front here. So that's, in a real nutshell, what we've launched, and it's happening. I mean, we're past the point of no return. We are putting this enterprise on the street in the spring, hopefully in March. Some people have said, man, you're moving too fast, you've got to slow it down, lease the building to somebody else, and we said, no, we're on our way. So let's take a few minutes just in terms of fundamental questions about what actually this co-op is about, what it's going to be offering, and then we want to structure some discussion. Any questions? What we're up to?
I'm curious to know how you came up with the name and why the word well is there, because to be frank, when I first heard about it, I thought it had some connection to the well at St. John's on
The Women's Center.
Mm-hmm.
The name kind of originated in one of those kind of intuitive moments where it just felt like that was the name of the place. A bit like some folks when they have a child, they experience the child and the child tells them its name. It was that goofy. But what the well is about was very much an image of the place that people in the community came daily, to get the nourishment they need, to meet one another, to connect, to tell stories, share gossip, get some water. So it was that sense of the place in the community where we came for nourishment, we met one another. So that's kind of where it came from. And we're aware of the well, and we're hoping that we're distinct enough as a food retailer that over time that clarity will be okay.
Can you talk a little more about the patio, and you said you're using the park across the street?
Yeah. So we have a pretty generous sidewalk out front here, some of which we own, about 6 feet of it, and then there's quite a lot of generous space. And because it's a dead-end street, it creates a lot more possibility of us actually having our patio out there. But also the city has this triangular park called Somerset Square right here, and they've put a lot of money into fixing it up and making it beautiful. And there's a group in this neighborhood called the Hintonburg Economic Development Committee. They tend all the gardens, it's all volunteer, but people don't hang out there yet. As you probably know, it was the main drug and sex trade spot for this part of Ottawa for a long time. So people were coming here looking for nourishment of one kind or another for a long time. And we're hoping to connect to that tradition, but offer something maybe a little more sustainably nourishing. But the city and the city councillor, Catherine Hobbs, has been really active with us, saying, we want you to help us bring this square to life. And so talks about music in the park, possibly getting some tables built out there that we can put umbrellas up, working with some of the other retailers. There's a Christmas store over there that's willing to do the Christmas tree thing, but collectively trying to bring that park alive, make it much more of a people place than it currently is. And the Economic Development Committee we've been partnering with, they've been really working hard in this neighborhood for about 20 years to bring people back onto the street, bring people into this park and other parks, so it becomes a welcoming space. Also, OCISO, who you may know, Ottawa Community Immigrant Services Organization, who have a large apartment building here for new Canadians, and their offices there. We've been partnering with them. They're really interested to make this well a place that's welcoming for new Canadians. In what we're offering, how we're presenting it, the art, the music, and they also are very interested in having ethnic festivals in the street, in the park. So I said to the executive director, what do ethnic festivals center around? Food. What are we doing? Food. This looks like a good match. So there's a lot of intention to bring vitality, not just to this building, but out onto the street, out into the square. But it's very much as we move out onto the street, we're moving out with the other businesses and the other organizations. Causeway, who's right over here, OCISO, who's here. And it'll take time to build presence in the square and where people are hanging out more, but that's our goal over the next couple of years. Other questions?
Maybe I missed something. Do you know, or I'm sure you know, where the most of the revenue for your operating expenses will come
Yeah.
from?
So a quick way into that is that in permaculture, when you're designing a food system, you're trying to understand how life is actually moving on that piece of land and work with it and amplify it. And so we've taken a lot of time to study this neighborhood. And something I didn't mention was that some of you may know that the network called Slow West, Sustainable Living Ottawa West. Many of us who are involved in this are involved in Slow West. So we've been in this neighborhood for 3 to 4 years, getting to know the businesses, getting to know the community, and understanding how its dynamics are, and we want to build on that. But also, economically, in a permaculture model, if you're going to invest a lot of resources, you've got to make that serve multiple purposes. And so, for example, for us, it's the kitchen. It's a major investment. So, first rate off, we're sharing the cost of that kitchen with Stone Soup for Foodworks, another business. Already that cost is spread over more than one enterprise. In our enterprise, what we've done is look at the whole mix of using that kitchen for a baker to come in early in the morning and be baking fresh bread and baked goods that we'll both serve in the cafe and sell in the grocery. There's fairly good margins on baked goods. The Breakfast crew comes in, we develop a nutritious, simple, comfort breakfast. There's decent margins on that food. We'll have coffee service and baked goods all day. There's very good margins on that. We'll have our lunch. Again, there's decent margins on that. But once the lunch crew is finished around 2:30, they'll be extending their work in the kitchen to do prepared meals. So you'll be able to stop on your way home from the LRT, pick up a mason jar of soup, a lasagna, all those kinds of prepared meals that are becoming very popular, and there's very good margins on those. So our mix of the whole food cluster is very diverse, and different margins that we understand. And the produce, the retailing that we're doing, it's recognized. Fresh produce, local organic fresh produce, the margins are very, very tight. And we know what those margins are, we have those figures, but we also know that when you include dry goods, you include some of the other kinds of non-perishables, your margins are quite different. And if you're looking at vitamins and some supplements in a modest way, the margins there are quite high. So we're designing a mix that's resilient, that we're not relying on one offering, but we're also spreading our major costs like the kitchen over about 5 or 6 different revenue streams. So none of those things have to pay for the whole kitchen. So that's kind of our confidence around our projections. We're being very, very modest in our projection of sales and very clear about what our costs are going to be. So we'll be very conservative when we say that we can break even by mid-second year.
We also have rental income coming in from both possibly evening usage of the kitchen, from like evening rentals for preservers or something like that, and also rental of the upstairs floor of the office, as well as some other income from fees for room usage at times. And so there's like a number of revenue streams. It's actually fairly complicated doing, but it's a lot of streams, so it kind of keeps things smoother, right?
But just to give one example of how this has caught people's imagination, you may know the group, the Spirit of Rasputins, that are carrying on the kind of music that used to happen in Rasputin. I met with them last week. They're looking for a home. They do 140 events a year. When they see what's possible on the ground floor of a 60-person venue, because what we're going to have is 30 people in cafe seating, but also all our grocery shelving will be flexible. We'll be able to move it out and add another 30 seats of theater seating. So for a performance, we'll be able to, the fire marshal told us 60 people max. For Rasputin's, that's a really nice sized venue. They're looking for a home. If this could be their post box, if they could have a lockable file cabinet, if they could hold their board meetings here and their annual meeting here, they'd like to put one of their major regular events here once a month. Well, for us, that's going to cost us like almost nothing. And they're going to create this whole flow of people coming. They're going to be buying coffee, picking up a beer, buying some goods. So there's a lot of synergies in the relationships that we're working on, and we're being rather straight up with people. We're a for-profit business. When we're entering relationships with people like Rasputin's or any other partners, it's because there's reciprocity. It's got to be a two-way flow. We have to, the well has to be nourished by what they're bringing, and they have to be nourished by their experience here. So we're being fairly hard-nosed in our partnerships about not just a lot of conversation that may or may not lead to anything. In the short term, we're looking for partners for whom this really helps them do what they need to do, and there's a reciprocal benefit. So the numbers are actually really encouraging. And you can take a look at them very soon.
Come talk to me at the break, LD1.
And I have another question about how many employees you'll have?
Yeah, I don't know if we have our hard numbers, but we're probably in the range of a dozen to 15-ish, I think.
Yeah.
Part-time and full-time.
Part-time and full-time.
And in kitchen and grocery, right?
Yeah.
So there's
Different hours of the day, there'll
Yeah.
be different numbers of people here for the heavy times and lower times.
Is it common in Ontario food co-ops for people to work in exchange for discounts on food, that kind of arrangement, in some kind of membership benefit? If you work then so many hours a month, then you get a
Yeah.
discount?
That's not uncommon in food co-ops. We're going to talk more after the break about membership and what it actually is about, because there are different forms of membership, and we've chosen a particular one. Just to answer it quickly, what we're largely saying that membership in this co-op will be about is not actually getting a discount in one way or another. It'll be about people who want to make this happen, who want the ownership and the control and the decisions about this place rooted in this community as opposed to elsewhere. And so we're asking people to imagine themselves as co-creators and co-owners rather than consumers who figure out they're going to get about 8% off something. We're offering a different invitation, but we'll go into that in a lot more detail after the break.
And
So-
these staff get fed when they work. That's when that's a kitchen rule. You get to eat.
So
there's that.
well, there is. I don't want to get into the whole membership things. It's
But yeah,
complicated
that's
and
it for
but there are
some.
worker members, there are community members, and there are producer members, and they have different relationships, and we'll talk about that.
Thank you.
As kind of a follow-up, and maybe you'll touch on this, but this one-time fee of $50 seems like it would be quite prohibitive to a lot of people in the community. And if the desire is to get people of different socioeconomic
Yep.
backgrounds in and also taking ownership, not just stopping by or whatever, then I wonder if this is just for now or what your rationale was for.
Yeah, we wanted it to be something different than the $5 kind of thing that some membership things are. And we struggle a lot with where to set it. So what we've said is that we think this is not a barrier for a lot of people who might be interested in this. And for anyone for whom it is actually a barrier, we'll do a work exchange. And we'll find a way, a formula, where if this is actually, and you want to be involved here, you want to be a member, it's not, just to remember, you don't have to be a member to shop here or to buy things here. And as a member, you're not actually going to get a discount compared to anyone else who comes off the street. Again, this is getting us into the next piece, but if somebody wants to belong here and influence the direction and take ownership, take responsibility for making this happen, and the $50 is an issue, it won't be a barrier. And we'll figure out a way to make sure that that's not embarrassing or awkward kind of thing.
Bill, there was a question back in the gentleman in the corner. You couldn't see his hand.
Yeah, sorry, my blind spot.
Oh yeah, no problem. So you said there are CSA drop-offs and obviously some organic producers here, so that's neat. I have a drop-off up Bayswater right now, so would that be open for, you know, producer members sort of thing? And
Would it be open?
well, would like to have a CSA drop-off?
Absolutely. So, you know, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be inviting anyone who wants to provide food through this place to become a producer member. And then they will discuss together how they want to make that work. But it's an open invitation. If you're producing food, either as a farmer or you're making jam or making syrup or meals or anything, how can we make this work in a way that's reciprocal and works for both parties?
Are you going to have any dedicated meetings to people who are in that?
Yeah, they'll have their own membership category. They'll meet and they'll talk about the things they care about. They'll have a representative on the board, at least one, so the board is always thinking about the reciprocity of the producers in this place. So very much in terms of, this is getting us into it, but for the producer members or for the community members, it's going to be self-driven. What they care about is what this place will care about. So if the community members want classes on greenhouses and how to build windmills and how to compost your whatever, that's what we'll have classes on. The community will be the one setting that agenda. If the producers say we really want to deal with food presentation in a different way, we'll talk about that and they'll have an influence over how we function. So a couple more and then maybe we'll shift to something.
Is there any possibility of having a rooftop garden at some point down the
We
road? Or is
really wanted to do the rooftop thing, and it's a $125,000 tag to get up on the roof, partly because the way the city interprets that is that we're creating another floor, and so we have to create a fire barrier from ourselves to our neighbor. That creates a snow load on his roof, so we had to pay $25,000 to reinforce his roof because of this wall that we don't need. So we had to pull back on that one, but it was part of the dream for sure.
Sure.
Yeah, I really like part of the vision where you're talking about kind of fitting in as like a partner with all the other services and products that are offered in the neighborhood, especially that are coming, as you mentioned. So I'm wondering if you didn't speak about, I'm interested in like the economic like niche you're going to fill, but a lot of the services or products you're talking about are probably going to be expensive. So I'm just wondering, is that the market you're looking for?
No, the way we've articulated in our business plan is that we hope, if we can work out our numbers the way they are, that we're going to land roughly in the middle between the kind of high-end Whole Foods kind of thing and Giant Tiger and Food Basics. And we don't know that we're going to be able to get lower than that. We'd love to be able to make that more accessible, and that's what a lot of the food co-ops are struggling with. How do we bring down the market? Because our food system is not designed for local, organic, accessible food. It's designed for food that travels at a great distance with low nutrition, high color, high presentation, and that's how the whole system is going, has been developing 50 years, and we're cutting across that grain. So we have a lot of work to do, but there are co-ops in the province who are doing really interesting things around that. So just as one example, there's one in Toronto in the Parkdale neighborhood, very similar to this. Low-income neighborhood right beside it, high gentrification happening on the other side of the street. They have a project going where there's a local employment social service agency. And if people go there and they take employment training and develop their skills, they get a gift card to buy their food at the co-op. They don't get a voucher that says, you know, I'm on low income and so I'm coming in the side door. No, they get the same gift card that the wealthy person in the gentrified neighborhood would buy for themselves. And they're able to come and buy the food, and the farmer gets the fair wage. A lot of people don't know, but the farmers market on Main Street that happens in St. Paul's parking lot, that's the only one in the province that's owned by the community. It's a non-profit, the community started, they own the market, they run it, they make a profit. They give some of their profit to the local community health center who work with people on low income, who then give what they call market dollars to those folks to be able to come up the street and buy food from the farmers, and the farmers don't lose income. So there are a lot of experiments with how do we break down this accessibility issue. And what we're saying is, we don't have a solution or a magic answer, but we're on for the challenge. We're on for the question, and we want to work with anyone who's willing to work that question. So one of the farmers that we're very connected with is Roots and Shoots at Manotick. They opened up land for the food bank about 3 years ago. The farmer helped the food bank buy the seed at a very good price. The food bank volunteers went out. The farmer showed them how to open the land, how to plant the seeds. They weeded it, they harvested it, and the food bank got hundreds of pounds of local organic vegetables into the food bank for volunteer effort and paying for the seed. So there are people in the city who are really working this question, but it's not easy. And we just want to join that project and say, hey, we can provide part of the energy to address that, but it's going to be challenging. So we're trying to get it as low as we can without the farmers taking a hit or paying our staff really, unfair wages. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be challenging. Any last questions before we shift gears a little bit?
I was just wondering if you could say a bit about your background and how you became involved in this.
Me personally? I was one of the folks who originated Slow West, and we started as a grassroots network that took a very particular approach to say, when we're looking at these environmental challenges, let's not try and get Mr. Harper to change his mind. Other people are working on that, we'll lend our voice to that. Let's not try and figure it out for the whole city, because that gets overwhelming. Let's take this neighborhood, from the tracks to Carling to the river and to around Woodruff or Bayshore. And let's try and figure out solutions that we could do, things we can do. And let's focus on what we can do. And so like Right Bike, the bike sharing project, was a project we got started with Causeway. There were community gardens that we helped get started. We did coffee houses at Bridgehead for a couple of years to encourage local music and local connections. So we were working in that for several years, and what we found was that without any infrastructure, without any platform, the volunteer effort was hard to sustain. People spend way too much energy finding a room we could afford to meet in, getting the word out. So this project was conceived kind of simultaneously. Slow West was born, and it kind of had a twin. and it was this. Slow West got going much quicker, but about halfway through that experience, we realized if we had a place, we had a platform, and we had some staff, we could do so much more. So a couple of years ago, we decided, let's go for it. And that's kind of where it all came from. Okay, so last question.
I'm curious about the relation between membership and ownership. Is each member an owner, or
Yeah.
are you thinking of introducing any limits to the shares one can own?
So we're going to talk about that in a fair bit of detail in a minute, but basically in a co-op model, the members own the co-op. One member, one vote, doesn't matter how many shares you buy, you have no more influence. So the basic structure of the co-op is each person buys one membership share. That gives them a voice, they elect people on the board, they participate, they contribute, they are co-creating the entity, and they collectively own it. In addition to that, you can invest in the co-op, but it doesn't give you any more influence. So we'll talk about that in a bit of detail, but fundamentally, the people who decide to join end up owning the place, running, guiding the place. They elect a board, the board's accountable to them. So decisions about, what we emphasize, where we go, are made by the folks who have made that choice. And what we're really talking about in terms of membership is people who want to step up and make this happen. It's very different from a consumer co-op where you think, well, okay, $50 once in a lifetime, if I can get 3% off my coffee, this is worth it for me. We're going to the other end of the telescope and say, do you want to make this happen? Do you want to create this in the community? Do you want it to be rooted in community ownership? It's a different kind of engagement around membership. So it isn't like we're going to need thousands and thousands of members. We'll probably need thousands and thousands of customers, but we'll need a group of dedicated people who want to create this thing together. And so, if this place is not going to save you 4% on your food, why would you bother to become a member? If you can come here and shop, even if you're not a member, why would you become a member? And so, I've already kind of touched on this, and I keep freezing this puppy. So this is an invitation, a major opportunity to join with other people who share your hopes and dreams about a sustainable, socially just, and spiritually fulfilling way of living in this part of Ottawa. The invitation is to co-create this new community resource, to becoming involved, to building food security and resilience in the community. And it's happening. So you're not having to start from square one. It's happening. The invitation is to come on board, to contribute your energy, your ideas. So fundamentally, in any co-op, a member is a co-owner. There's one member, one vote. It's a fundamental principle. You can't get incorporated as a co-op if you don't have that as your foundation, and a number of other principles. And everybody often talks about the rights of membership, and they're important. But there's also the responsibilities of membership, and we want to hold both of those. So there's the right and responsibility to elect the co-op's board, to participate in setting direction about plans and policies, how we function, where we're going, what we're emphasizing, what we're paying attention to, and to contribute actively to the development of the co-op through committees. I'm sure we're going to have a committee on food justice, on food security. People are going to want to talk about the challenges in Ottawa and what is the well doing to participate in that. So that's really the invitation, that the ownership of this whole place is rooted in the people who become members. So it's a conscious choice to support this enterprise. Yes, there's a $50 lifetime fee, but for people with whom that's actually a barrier, we'll find a way through that, I think, fairly easily. And it's about building this co-op. And we're imagining if you become a member, you'd probably want to shop here, or take courses here, or like if you never darkened the door, that'd be okay, but kind of hard to imagine. So what's the benefit of this if they're not going to save 3%? Well, it's the meaning and satisfaction of taking action together. A lot of us have been trying to address sustainability and justice in our own individual households, in our own lives, but collectively there's something more we can do, and that's what one of the benefits will be. You'll have influence over the direction and the key decisions of the co-op. Only members of the co-op will be able to invest in the co-op, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. There will be other benefits that the board will determine, but we need to recognize any kind of discounts that you get on the front end reduces the dividend that you might get on the back end. So if you think of yourself as an owner, you think of inheriting the benefits of what happens rather than being at the front door and figuring out the discount I'm going to get before we begin. And we're asking people to go to the other end of the telescope and look at it from there. So you don't have to be a member to shop. In terms of other benefits, well, okay, maybe we'll, this will be guided by the membership, but okay, if we have a ticketed event performance downstairs, because we only have 60 seats, we'll ticket it. Maybe it's $4, maybe it's $6. For members, maybe we'll let them have a day to buy those tickets before they're open to the public. There will be little things like that we'll be able to do, but primarily we're saying it's not a consumer model, it's not a discount model, it's an ownership model. And that's not going to be appealing to everyone. So there's three types of members. Workers, employees who work here for usually the worker co-ops, it's 12 to 15 months where people really figure out is there a long-term fit here. And if it's a mutual decision, yes, the invitation is to become a worker member. And as a worker member, they will enjoy the particular rights and opportunities that most worker co-ops provide. They'll have a say about how the place is running, how it's operating. It's not going to be a collective, but there'll be very progressive management practices. And there will be a mechanism put in place where the financial success of the operations will have tangible return to them, because they're going to be prime movers in making that happen. So as a multi-stakeholder co-op, which is only about 5 or 6 years in Ontario where this is possible, we're able to mix these different types of membership. So essentially workers will be able to have the experience of a workers co-op with some extra benefits. Community members and workers will elect, I think it's like between 1 and 3 members to the board. The board will be between 9 and 12 people. So the workers will elect at least 1 and probably 2 or maybe 3 members on the board of directors who will be setting the policies and the directions for the co-op, and the workers' perspective will be integrated into that thinking and those decisions. The community members will elect the majority of the board. I think it's like 5 to 7 or 8 or something. And again, we imagine community members, their main area of interest, we're not going to be asking you to come in and analyze the workflow in the kitchen. The workers will be figuring that out. But shaping the program, shaping what the classes are about, all the things that you're talking about the programmatic side of the well. We'll also be asking you feedback on how good the food is and how things are working. But you'll be electing people on the board, and there will be committees. There'll be obviously issues that we're addressing over time, and then there'll be also task forces. We've got to do X, Y, Z in the next 12 months. Who can pitch in and help make this happen? Producer members we've talked about. Any farmer or person creating food that's going to be sold here, they'll be invited to be a member. They'll elect a representative on the board. They'll have their own forums to talk about what their concerns are, but they'll also be part of our bigger conversation. They'll care about things that everybody else cares about. So there's those 3 different types of members. So we've talked about this, pretty much what I've covered. Community members, it's a conscious choice to become a co-owner, engage in developing the co-op, the program, and community members will receive a share of the profits of the organization, of the enterprise. As it happens, provincial legislation puts a very explicit cap on what that profit sharing can be, so we behave within the legislation. But essentially, as a member, you'll get a dividend on the success of the organization each year. So the producers, obviously they're going to have a particular interest in the terms and conditions of agreement of how they're selling stuff here, how their food is presented. They too will receive a percentage of the profits and will have a representative on the board. So how can you be involved right now? There's the opportunity to become a member. So the white sheet on your chair is an opportunity to apply for membership. The way the laws work, the board has to approve your membership. So if you submit that form, We'll be engaging CSIS and several other security agencies to vet you before you're accepted. Either that or at the next board meeting you'll be accepted. I'm not quite sure which it'll be. But right now, one of the major things you can help with is spreading the word in the neighborhood. We have work to do, but largely we've got most of the work assigned at this point. And as you can imagine, when we're in the crunch period, having huge committees of people working on some of this practical stuff is not always that effective. So by and large, when you look around what we're working on, in most cases, we have the people we need to get it done, with a few exceptions. The whole issue of membership engagement, reaching out to people, explaining what we're explaining, inviting people to become involved. We need more folks working on that. We're getting invitations to go here and present and go there and present, and we're all volunteers, and there's a limit. So we're going to create the tools, the presentations, the brochures. But we could use some help there. Promotion and marketing, and particularly in social media, we have a really highly qualified advisor. He's a specialist with a national nonprofit who works in social media, freely giving us his guidance and advice, but we need people actually doing the social media communications. Right now it all comes off my keyboard, and there's a limit. So we've got Facebook, we've got Twitter, we've got the YouTube account, and Adam's video will be up there before midnight, hopefully. But we need people amplifying that through the, so these are places where we could really use some help. Community networks. I was chatting, we have relationships with some community partners. It's somewhat accidental that we've been in conversation with some for over a year, and others we haven't met yet. Partly because we're volunteers and we've been spread really thin. But if you have time and energy for helping us weave our relationships into the fabric of this neighborhood and these neighborhoods, we need help with that. We don't need hundreds of people, but in all of these areas, we need 3 or 4 people who are ready. And this was a shift for us from Slow West days, which is still going on, but to the West End Well. And Slow West, if a group of people got together and they decided to create a garden or to do this or to do that, if they got 50 yards down the road or 60 yards down the road, nobody died. I mean, it didn't matter. We were doing something and we were moving. Well, here it's going to matter. We're opening March 1st, and we need to be financially viable. So we don't need huge conversations and exploratory. Right now, we've got a very clear focus. So involvement between here and March 1st is very task-oriented. That's going to shift once our doors are open and we have employees and things are running. The involvement will shift to much more direction setting, conversation, issues exploration, shaping the program. So for those of you who are interested to put your shoulder to the wheel, in the short term, these are the kinds of things where we could really use some help. In the longer term, it'll be much more spacious, there'll be much more room for conversation and for exploring ideas together. But right now, we've got a deadline and we're pretty focused. So the thing about investing, a for-profit co-op offers preference shares. If you're a nonprofit co-op, you end up offering a bond, a community bond, to raise money for your operations. For-profit co-ops offer preference shares, like OREC has done, and we're using their model. We need operating capital to pay for our tenant fit-up. The holding company is taking care of all the heavy-duty renovations to the heating system and the plumbing and the electrical. But then if you're a tenant, you take care of the fit-up, and for us, it's particularly the kitchen and the grocery setup. And we need cash flow for the first couple of years of operation. We're going to be profitable by the middle of the second year, but for the first, year and a half, we're not profitable. We need cash flow support. And there's development costs for the co-op. The business plan estimate is that we need about $350,000 to bridge these needs over the first 3 to 5 years. So what happens in the co-op is you have to be a member to purchase these shares. You have no increased influence in the co-op because you own 1 or 500 of these shares. It's a pure investment. Obviously you're a member, so you have a vote and you're doing what every other member is. The shares cost $500. You don't have to buy more than 1 if you want to invest. They are eligible as RSP investments, so if you have existing RSP funds, you can just move them over, buy these shares. If you're making contributions to your RSP this year, you can buy these shares with those funds and you get the tax receipt. Our offering of these shares has to be approved by an organization called the Financial Services Commission of Ontario. So it goes through this fairly rigorous approval process like OREC went through, and they've modeled for us. So in about mid to late November, we'll be holding gatherings. If you're interested in this, there's a little box to check there on your form. We'll explain all the technicalities. You'll have the 32-page offering statement and the 73-page business plan. And what the province cares about is that what you're buying is clear. And so it has to be really clear. And basically what the offer is going to be is, if you buy these shares, in the first year, there's not going to be a dividend, because we know we're not going to make money in the first year. By year 2, we expect to be able to target about a 2% return on your investment. By years 3, 4, 5, we're looking at 3 to 5% as a target. But this is a dividend. So the ability for the company to pay that dividend based on its success. If we fail, we'll sell everything and you'll get 60 cents on the dollar or whatever. This is an investment in a startup company. It's not a secured bond of any sort. But what we're anticipating is that by year 3, 4, that we'll be looking at a modest range of 3 to 5% dividend. And by about year 5, the co-op will start buying back, it's called redeeming those shares. So the business plan shows us allocating a certain portion of our profit, so that by about year 9, we've actually paid off all those shares. And we have our own operating reserve to be viable. So this is an invitation to actually invest your own money in making this viable. And if you're interested in that, it's very much in the slow money movement. It's not about making a real quick return in a short term, but it's about investing in this. And so that offering, we expect the province to approve in a month or 5 weeks. And we'll be holding special sessions, and the lawyers will be here, and the accountants will be here, and you'll have all the technical info. So, questions about membership or the preference share piece? And I guess one last thing to say, the co-op's obligation financially is first and foremost to the preference shareholders. So the profit that we have in the first few years will be going to pay that investment and redeem those shares. The return to members is limited by the province, by the legislation, but also it comes after we've returned the capital to the preference shareholders. So as a general member, the province's legislation is it's prime plus 2% is the maximum a co-op can return to its members each year. So that's what we'll live within. But that won't be happening until we have discharged our liability to the preference shareholders. So that's what membership is about and what the investment piece is about. And real detailed questions about the investment, probably best for the specific session, but questions about membership, why, what it means.
You mentioned membership being a dual thing of rights and responsibilities. Is there a limited amount of interaction or investment a member would have to do? Is it possible to lapse on membership, or?
Technically and legally, yes, the board can decide that somebody's doing something really heinous and violating the bylaws and that kind of thing. In practical purposes, in the spirit of what we're talking about, it's an invitation. So if somebody becomes a member and they never show up, and they don't vote, and they don't participate, they're not going to harm the co-op, but it's not what it's about. So will we bother to go and talk to them and say, you know, make a decision? I doubt it, but the intention is that people make that choice to be involved, but there's no kind of regulating the involvement. Other thoughts about?
Is there a liability associated with membership of the owner of preference shares?
No. the lawyer can help you with the actual technical wording, but essentially, the members are not liable for any of the liabilities of the corporation. And the preference shareholders, the only liability you have is if you put, say, $5,000 of RSP funds in these shares and we go under, you're not going to get all that money back. You're going to get back whatever we can liquidate. And that's our first obligation. If we do not succeed, our first obligation is to return as much capital as possible to those shareholders. So that's the real risk. Membership, there is, if we're not viable, membership has no exposure.